Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience, where we cozy up to the fire in our digital den and immerse ourselves in the inspiration born from exploring the hidden narratives and inevitable plot twists that shape every compelling startup journey. Join us as we showcase inspirational guests from bold investors with the Midas touch to pioneering entrepreneurs at the helm of today's most thrilling startups. We'll also hear from courageous go-to-market leaders navigating the frontier of emerging tech and the unsung heroes bringing all the people and parts together to form unstoppable dream teams. Here's your host, Kraig Ward, founder and managing director of Bear Hug Recruiting. Get ready for an insightful journey.
The following is a conversation with Aashish Dhamdhere, the co-founder and CEO of Relevvo, an AI-powered B2B sales marketing platform that helps B2B companies identify and target the 5 to 10% of accounts in a company's addressable market that are engagement ready at a given point in time. Before founding Relevvo, Aashish served in various product and program management roles at Microsoft on the Visio and Azure teams, and then as a marketing leader at several high-growth B2B software startups, including Skilljar, Amperity, LiquidPlanner, and most notably, Apptio, where he built the global demand generation function, helping the company scale from 20 million to hundreds of millions of dollars leading up to their IPO. Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience. And now, dear friends, fellow entrepreneurs, investors, and startup enthusiasts, here is Aashish Dhamdhere. All right. Aashish, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate you doing this. How are you feeling coming into the call today?
Kraig, great to be here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. It's interesting, the connection that we've had. We've hit it off, and it feels like we look at the world through a similar lens. And when you shared your idea about the podcast, it felt like you sharing your enthusiasm, energy, excitement about technology, and all things related to how technology is shaping society, changing careers, recruiting, all of those things with a wider audience. So the opportunity to sit down with you to geek out on a few of these things together it's really what's making me excited about this conversation.
Why don't we talk to our listeners today about your mission? I know that you've got a big one and an important one. So why don't you start off by telling our listeners what you're up to these days and why it matters?
Yeah. So I've spent my career in startups, basically the last 20 years. And I started the entrepreneur, as you called it, started with my journey at Microsoft, where I was a part of the founding team of this incubation project called Red Dog, which ended up becoming Azure. As you know, Azure is now a big thing for Microsoft. I've gone on and worked at 4 startups since. And the big aha that I had is all these cool companies, and there are so many cool technology companies, they tend to make it or not make it on the basis of finding an audience, which is finding the people who have the problem that they solve, people who have use cases that fit what they need, companies that are actively dealing with issues that these companies could solve. And that's the problem that most companies struggle to solve. That's the problem we've taken on. Typically, this problem was solved using what I call spray and pray methods, which is let's reach out to as many people as we can, and then we'll see if anybody responds. With everything that's happened in the markets in the last 6 months to a year, that's just not an option anymore. And so what we're helping companies do, B2B companies, technology businesses primarily, is find other companies that are what we call engagement ready, companies that are actively facing pains, challenges, have buying triggers, that they're ready to talk to you because they have problems that they want solved. Now, this might be a bit of a geeky explanation, and I could break this down a little more if you like, but that's sort of what we're up to. We're a startup that's taken on this problem of helping businesses connect with other businesses to really solve these problems.
Businesses that are closer to a point where an engagement with them could be meaningful and substantial rather than spraying and praying.
100%
Okay.
correct. Just one other clarification or sort of one other exclamation point here is when you are a business, there's this thing called a total addressable market. What are the people that you could sell to? There's always millions of companies that you could sell to at a given point. As it turns out, though, only about 2 to 5% of them are actively in a place where they want to talk to you.
Mm.
And that's always been the challenge. The challenge has been how do we find these people? How do we find these companies that it's like car shopping? If you take a consumer example, if you look at the US market, there's whatever 330 million odd people, a significant chunk of them are probably going to buy cars in the next 3 to 5 years. If you're a car marketer, though, the big thing or the golden goose, as it were, would be if you could find exactly the group of people that are considering buying a car right now. And if you could reach
Hmm.
just those people, then you could save a lot of effort, money on reaching out to the others that are not looking to buy. And you would have much better results. Your conversion rates would look better. You would have higher sales. And so that's our goal.
This is so interesting because any entrepreneur, any go-to-market team, like any team that's early in a startup, right? That is the obsessive question.
It is.
How do we solve that specific problem? What are the signals, the intent signals? Who are they? What are they thinking about? What are they needing? What are they struggling with? So you've seen this as a pattern in everything that you've done, starting at Microsoft and then through the 4 startups that you worked inside of. And now today with your own company, you're looking to just hit that really important question head on. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And intent, Craig, you used the word intent. Intent's a loaded word because
Hmm.
in the MarTech sales tech world, intent is behavioral. It typically is people who are actively looking for a solution.
Hmm.
And if you think about what I call engagement ready companies, some will have behavior, some will be out there looking for solutions. Many, most, especially if your solution is innovative, have no idea that you exist and are therefore not even looking for a solution. And those are the
Hmm.
people you need to reach.
Especially if you have a new category that you're trying to create, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. All the more so if you're doing a category creating product and you're truly innovating, then you're trying to reach people who may not even know that a solution exists to the problem that they're trying to solve.
Okay, so looking at sort of the just timeline from Microsoft through these 4 startups and then the company that you have today, can we say the name of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Relevvo, Relevvo. And it's a play on the relevance because for us, the absolute key to connecting, for two people to connect, is to have a shared sense of relevance. And so it's a play on that.
Mm, okay. So as you look at the history of the Microsoft journey through these 4 startups to what you're working on today, you've seen in yourself qualities that make you perfectly attuned to take this on, right? I mean, you're not the first person to try to solve this problem.
Not at
So
all.
this is a really it's clearly a big problem. Lots of people are trying to solve it in different ways. You must have some particular unique attribute about your personality, your character that really sets you apart from your peers. And you've seen it when you were working inside of companies, as a marketing leader when I met you, right? Um, what is the superpower that you can put your finger on, and how would you label that superpower that you have had and you've cultivated over time?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think two or three things come to mind. It's the synthesis of these three things, which I think about as my superpower. One is I have a tremendous appetite for information and a bandwidth to really hold a lot of things in my head at the same time. And when you run a company, you run your own company, you know how it is. There are always 50 different balls you're juggling at the
Hmm.
same time. And you have to enjoy that. You have to actively enjoy the process of having these different things going on and following these different threads and remembering the details. So I'd say that's one bit. The second bit is in working with some amazing leaders, I've learned how to become a systems thinker where as opposed to solving for the symptom, you try to locate the root cause of an issue and you go after that. And that tends to be super important not just in the product that you're building, but even the company that you're building, the relationships that you're building. So that's probably number two. And then number three is I love talking to people. I love sharing new ideas. I love learning from people. And that typically translates into an ability to build meaningful relationships, which are so important if you're the CEO of an early stage company, because sales, business development, marketing is at least 50% of your job. So it's probably a combination of those three things that gives me the confidence and the energy to keep doing what I'm doing on a daily basis.
So I'm going to challenge you to give it one word. If you had to boil those three things down and choose one word, I know it's super constricting to do that. Can you come up with one word that mostly encompasses the superpower?
Let's see.
3 words that go together?
Even
1 to 3?
if I had to, if I had to pick one word, I mean, maybe two words that go together, it would be the sense of really intentional energy. And I don't know if that's too abstract, but you have to be a jack in the box, if you will, in the startup world or in any business. When you're starting it up, you have to keep popping up no matter what happens on a daily basis. But you have to do that with a sense of intention and a plan, and it has to fit the system, as we were talking about. So it would probably be those two words: is my ability to dedicate, focus, intentional energy on a problem on a consistent, ongoing basis is probably my superpower.
Okay, so on the flip side of our superpowers, there's lots of different ways to think about, you have a strength to a fault. Like that's often something that we'll hear people talk
Yes.
about. What are the things that could be the flip side of your superpower that drain your energy or wear you down? Or you could look at it more from the standpoint of as you're trying to accomplish this mission and put it out there and solve this problem, what are the things that you constantly bump into that are they're just always there? Just to give us kind of a holistic perspective on, the strengths and the things that really kind of you have to grapple with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. So two things pop up. One is clearly I get energy from sharing my excitement and enthusiasm about this problem space, the solution. But I would, you that energy has to be reflected back, or you need to get back something from the people that you're talking to. And that's true of your teammates, that's true of your partners, that's true of your customers, that's true of what we call our prospects. And that's not going to happen. You are going to talk to people who are not going to give you anything back, and you have to teach yourself how to deal with that. Because as it's like being a parent and you holding up your baby to the world and saying, "Isn't this baby so cute?" And some people are going to be like, "I've seen cuter." Sorry, and you have to know how to deal with that. And that's something you have to teach yourself. And I would say that I don't know if it's a kryptonite as much as it's something that I have to watch for, which in a given day, there are days in which, you'll pitch your product and it'll land with everything in every single conversation that you have. And in other cases, it won't. And you have to manage yourself. Managing your own energy is extremely important. And that's one of those things that's one of those kryptonite elements that can take away from my energy, which is so important in my going after the mission that I'm trying to reach. That's probably number one. Number two, which doesn't happen as often, I think number two is why I am an entrepreneur, but I cannot do the same thing over and over again for months. Right. And so it's this element of if I just had to keep doing that, and I know that's, again, it's a bit abstract, but I enjoy the element of, I enjoy dealing with ill-defined or half-defined problems. I enjoy dealing with volatility. I enjoy dealing with change, rapid change, where you're constantly trying to figure out sort of where you're at. And that's what draws me to startups. And that's what ultimately led me to start my own company. I don't think I could do just routine.
So you find that you can thrive in that ambiguity.
100%.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
That's not, well, going back to what you had said about you can't do the same thing over and over again. The people that can do that, do they like it? Is it healthy for them? Can they just turn on the mechanical mode and just plug in and grind it out every day for a paycheck or whatever? Yeah, but I think really what that speaks to that desire to not do the same thing over and over again. Isn't it really boiled down to your need to be creative?
It does. And I would say horses for courses, Craig. So this is where I don't know if there's one model that fits everyone. I know people, really good friends of mine, who are what motivates them or drives them is the pursuit of mastery.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they're doing, you may think they're doing the same thing over and over again. They are, but what they're really trying to do is get better and better and better at it
Yeah.
on a daily basis. And which is not to say that I'm not trying to do that same thing in my pursuit, but it depends on your domain. It depends on the problem that you're excited about. I mean, if you think about Edison's example comes to mind, where he's trying to work on that light bulb. I mean, I don't know if you believe the story or not. There's some doubt about it,
Yeah.
but he's testing the filament materials and he's testing them and he's testing them and he's doing it for months till he figures out something that
Mm-hmm.
works. And you could argue that that's he's working on the same thing, but he's driven by something that's slightly different from what maybe it's like it's really is the problem solved. It's how solved is the problem is probably the scale. And for some people, they'll take a mostly solved problem and keep working on it and working on it till it's perfect. And other people prefer there's no solution. Let's figure out if we can have a workable solution made as a framework.
Yeah. So it seems like there's another way of looking at it too that comes down to risk. Like
Yes.
you talk about you're being comfortable with ambiguity and with have to find problems. And then we talk about the repetition that could become boring, right? And the
Yes.
need for that newness that we all have.
Yes.
I'm a startup guy too, and I try to recruit people from sometimes larger companies who, I have to test their ability, their willingness, are they going to be able to survive
Yes.
in this like less ambiguous environment? It's such an interesting thing to look at. Um, what's really going to bring out a person's happiest, best,
Yes.
most productive, and innovative self, right? Like I
Totally.
geek out on that all the time. So uh, anyway, we could go off on this a lot longer, but
Oh,
just wanted to add
that's
that
such
in
a good.
there.
No, it's such a good question. The somebody told me once the analogy of a startup is and it's a little bit dark, but it's not meant to be. You jump off a cliff in the middle of a night and you land in this water and it's dark and
Mm,
you have to figure out what to do. Like, are you going to just stay there waiting for someone to tell you what to do? Or are you going to
hmm
figure out where the shore is and start swimming towards it? And really, to your point, a lot of people will say the right things, but,
hmm
and I've made the journey. I used to work at Microsoft for 7 years. I was there a while, atypical sort of jobs within the company, but that's a big company. That's probably as big as it gets, the biggest company in the world, in tech, at
hmm
least,
hmm
in many ways. And I could make the transition, and there are people who enjoy, to your point, that ambiguity and want to figure it out. Others who don't, and the ones that don't, it's not. I don't think it's not a judgment on their character or personality. It's just they have to find the environments where they do their best work, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good point. Well, let's talk about your origin story. So I'm always really entertained by talking to candidates. I don't know if I did this with you when I first met you. I think I did because I've been doing it for years. But in order to give our listeners a window into where you come from, just for fun, I'm going to ask you to tell me your entire life story from the moment you were born up until today with a self-imposed, self-managed 5-minute time cap.
Okay.
So when I do this with candidates, I'm always so amused by what they choose to share when
Yeah.
they're under that sort of stress pressure, and how they manage that healthy stress is also important. And I want to see what comes out. So if you can take a look at the clock and hold yourself to your own 5-minute time cap and tell us your life story in 5 minutes.
Phenomenal. I'll start my life story by pulling on a thread that you brought up, which is the element of the idea of risk and how comfortable you are with risk. And I'll start by saying I come from a place of privilege because in a lot of cases, you can take risks only when you feel comfortable and only when
Mm,
you feel safe, even more than comfortable, safe. And I was born, to start my life story, I was born in India. And really, I think the thing that's helped me the most in my life is that I won the lottery of birth. To be one of the billions of people born in India, but to be born to a family that's well educated is, I had zero control in that. But that's really shaped my life more than anything else that I've done in the future. Sure, I've helped myself to some degree, whatever. We can talk about that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I was born to a surgeon and a physiotherapist. My parents are both in the medical field. And growing up, it was clear that education was extremely important. Hard work was extremely important. My parents are both entrepreneurs in their own ways. So I grew up seeing that example and seeing, one, how challenging it is, but two, how rewarding it is. And in many ways, idealizing how entrepreneurship pushes you to the limit in terms of being all that you can be in a given point. And that has always sort of been brewing in my head. I grew up in India in the 80s and the 90s, where really you only had two career options. You could either become a doctor or you could become an engineer. Thankfully, it's not like that anymore. But back then, that's how it was. And I decided early on that medicine was not it for me. So the choice was made. It was engineering, and
Hmm.
in many ways that's proved to be great for me. I became a chemical engineer and studied polymer science, and that was a phenomenal experience. Engineering, I think this is underappreciated. If I can say this, is engineering is so much more about learning how to think than it is about anything else. It's about problem solving, and it's about breaking down a problem into smaller pieces that you can then solve together. Again, this is not to say that, by the way, liberal arts does something which is beautifully complementary to this, which is this idea of looking at the whole and not looking at the small pieces always, which you have to teach yourself, because I think that's also an important way to solve problems. Maybe we can talk about that next. But that was my education. I worked for a year after graduating from engineering school in sales, and I was literally going door to door trying to sell CAD CAM equipment, right? Computer aided design, computer aided manufacturing equipment, and these workstations, these uh, Unix workstations that you can use to drive manufacturing. I worked for this huge conglomerate called Tata. It was a company called Tata Elxsi in India, and that experience was absolutely phenomenal for me, because it made me realize this thing that I told you, the energy that I get in talking to people, in bringing new ideas to them, in learning from them, because I was talking to people who worked in manufacturing, who worked in biotech, healthcare, just an amazing group of people that I could talk to. I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to see the world. And so I got a scholarship to the US. I came to the US in 1998, roughly 25 plus years ago, and got a master's in material science. Even as I was doing that master's, and this was at the Michigan State University in the Midwest, I knew that I wanted to move into tech software, because this was 1999, 2000, the height of the dot-com bubble. And I moved to the Valley when I graduated, and I worked for a company called Blue Martini Software. I got there too late. It was the April of 2020 when everything was falling apart, and my visa situation was a bit precarious, so I had to figure out what to do. And I ended up taking a safe job. So again, this is again going back to the concept of risk. And I worked for Capital One, the financial services company, for 3 years. Great experience. Learned a lot again about financial analysis, risk management, just how you can shape businesses through metrics. From there, got an MBA at Michigan, and it was from there that I went to Microsoft. My master's was in strategy and marketing. I spent 7 years at Microsoft, worked on the Visio product for the first 2 years, then worked on Azure for the rest of the time there. From there, I went to Apptio, which was really an absolutely phenomenal experience. I got there when they were roughly 20 million out in revenue, and stayed almost all the way to them going public. I've done 3 startups since, and then we've talked briefly about Relevvo since then. So that's my life journey in a nutshell. I think I hit that 5-minute mark right on the nose.
I love it. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. Um, I'm always fascinated to understand psychologists always point to this magical age of 7. When a person's 7 years old, there's only so much you could do to shape them. I don't know how much I want to buy into that. I've got 2 kids, one that's 8 and 11. And, I think about this a lot. Your parents were obviously very influential in those early years. Were there any other really, really, really significant influences on you other than your 2 parents during those formative years that you can point to?
Yeah, a couple. I had an uncle and my grandfather. They were also significant influences on me. My grandfather is an anthropologist, and he was working with what are called their the tribal population of India, and he was writing these dictionaries for them. And I just remember thinking, he was doing this when he was semi-retired, and I remember thinking, that's the way to have a vocation. Like that was the model of the vocation that formed in my head is he's going to keep doing this even if he doesn't get paid for it. And
Mm.
how cool is it to work on something like that? And the older I've gotten, the more I've come to appreciate it. So that was one influence. The other influence is I have an uncle who sadly passed away recently, but he taught at IIT, the IIT in Mumbai, which is quite famous. He was one of the first computer scientists in the country, and he's quite well known. In fact, his initials are DMD, and his students will often come up to me because my last name is quite uncommon, and they'll ask me, "Are you related to DMD?" And so he was a huge influence because he went to the Soviet Union back in the 70s to work on a computer. And I remember thinking, this is cool that he is studying something that he gets to travel the world and bring that thing back to India. And so those two were other huge influences on my life.
Did that end up impacting what you studied? How did that translate into your sort of professional journey, do you think? Those 2
Yeah, it's
influences.
to some degree, the love of technology has always been there, even as I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even though I joked about engineering being the only option, this at least a 60% chance that even if that was not the only option, I would have gone there. I suspect though that I would have double majored and done something in liberal arts along with that, if that I had the option, or gotten a second degree or something back then for my undergrad. It also the wanting to come to the US was driven strongly by what I saw with my uncle, because he was a visiting professor here at UC Riverside for a while and other universities. And so thinking about him, I knew that to really get good at any technical discipline, you have to come to the US. So that was the other major influence on my life.
Well, you started off talking about luck and privilege and winning the lottery, right? And statistically in India, being born into that family. I think about
Yes.
this all the time, actually, how much luck plays a role and how those that are more fortunate, myself being one of them as well, I just feel such a need and a desire to give back to those less fortunate. I really appreciated you calling that out. And I think that we often are blind to it when we're born into it.
True.
And like you said, the opportunities that we get access to are largely dependent upon that,
Very
and
true.
the ability for us to take risks, right? So when we think about moments of adversity, this is kind of
Yeah.
where I wanted to go with what I was just saying.
Yeah.
The type of adversity I want to ask you about that you've had in your life, I can point to, well, was it a big dramatic moment in your life and it's like, I'm going to go to America? I'm
Yeah.
sure as an American, I know that was traumatic on some level, even if you had privilege. But
Yeah.
can you think back, just thinking back on the story that you just shared about your life, what can you point to were the most pivotal moments that shaped your character?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for what you said about privilege and risk and your observation there. The two, and it's really the sense of gratitude. Having a sense of gratitude is extremely important. And coupling that, to bring it back to your question about adversity,
Mm-hmm.
what I find over and over again is you have to have a sense of agency, and that sense of agency has to be coupled with gratitude, meaning you have to remind yourself that things are not happening to you. You have the ability to shape them or to do something about it. And if that agency comes from a sense of gratitude, and if you stay open to what's happening, then you can make all kinds of things happen. I have a couple of stories, couple of sort of uh, examples on this, but I'll start with the first one. It was, again, 2000. I'm at this company called Blue Martini Software.
Mm.
Not to get into the minutia of the US immigration policy, but I'm on this thing where I have a year in the US to find a job that sponsors my visa for my stay. And I start working at Blue Martini. We're 4 months in, and the company's falling apart. They lay me off. So now I have, 8 months and counting to find a job where they, again, sponsor my visa. And it's super stressful because here you are, you don't have perspective. Would that have been catastrophic at that point? No, I know plenty of people who moved back to India who've had great careers, who are very happy right now. But that felt like the end of the world to me. That felt like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? This is horrible. And what I learned about myself in the journey was somehow you tap into this source of strength where you realize you remember your journey to that point. You remember in many ways the blessings you've had from not just circumstance, but people who love you and the people who are trying to support you. And that gives you that sense of agency to say, okay, what am I going to do about this? Oh, great. I remember talking to this recruiter at Capital One 6 months ago or so. They looked great. I went through the exam. They wanted to hire me. Let's go see if there's still an opening there. And to leave California is again, one of those things where you're moving from the epicenter of tech. You're moving away from the epicenter of tech to somewhere else. It's not a decision that I made lightly, but it's something that I knew back then that I could always come back to this. What I had to do was to find my footing first and to establish a footing in the US. And of course, so many of these things, like Steve Jobs joked, you can only connect the dots looking back, right? But what happened during that moment when I got laid off is you get the sense of, oh my God, the walls are closing in and I don't know if I have the resources to deal with this. So if you can, in that moment, calm yourself down, get a little bit of perspective on really what's going on, and then develop this sense of agency to chart a path out, you end up being in a much better place. I've learned this lesson over and over again, by the way, that so many times there are things you want, you get them, and you're happy. In a lot of cases, there are things you want, you don't get them, and you end up being happier, if that makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
So, the route that you wanted to take to wherever you wanted to go, sometimes you end up taking the more scenic route. And the more scenic route ends up leading to a more fulfilling journey, and it ends up to you going to a higher point, if you will. You're a mountains person again. I know this because we just talked about it. You end up going to a higher altitude because you took the more scenic route. And it may feel like you're going out of the way, but it actually takes you to a better place. I met my wife in Virginia, right? So I would never have met her if I hadn't moved there when I worked for Capital One. And that's probably the second most fortunate thing that's happened to me, is to meet this amazing person and building my life with her. So in so many ways, you have to be open to what the universe is giving you. And this is the life of the entrepreneur, and figure out what to do with it and make something of it.
So when we think about your ability to hold a lot of information in your mind, to be a systems thinker, and you love talking to people, right? I guess what I'm trying to do is link together that journey into the moment when you said, I've seen enough working in a company that I'm now going to start a company. Did you have any other entrepreneurial moments, or was Relevvo the first one?
No, it's the first one. I mean, working in many ways, I've gone from bigger to smaller and smaller companies before I started Relevvo.
Okay. Interesting.
Right. And that sort of, I was prepping myself, I think,
Yeah.
unconsciously to do this.
Down to being a founder.
That's exactly right. There's no real good prep to being a founder. It's not like there's something you can do to prepare to be a founder, but if you get to work with founders on a daily basis, which is what I got to do at 3 of my last 4 startups, that is pretty good training, because you at least get a secondhand sense of what they're doing and how they're solving problems and how difficult it is also, and also how rewarding it is. Both, combination of both of those things. The your early point is super interesting, which is what's the common thread in this journey across education, Microsoft, startups? There is this deep hunger for learning that's
Hmm.
clearly there. Still exists. So it's really picking problems that I want to dive super deep into.
Yeah.
That's probably common thread number one. Common thread number two is, and this is the reason I moved away from material science, is as much as I enjoy pattern recognition, as much as I enjoy problem solving and applying technology to solve to a problem, I think the hardest problem to solve is people dynamics, is changing how people think, is changing how people make decisions, is changing how people's lenses on problems. So I knew that I wanted to work on that in combination with technology. And that's been the other common thread is in sales, in marketing, you're trying to get people to change how they define a problem, to how they solve a particular problem, and to how they pick a specific vendor to solve that problem. And I find that to be incredibly interesting and exciting to solve because it's not always a rational process. It's a combination of the rational and the irrational in how people do this. And irrational, not in a bad way. It's just there's stuff in the unconscious that affects how people make buying decisions. And your ability to tap into that is is critical to your success. So that's probably the second thread. And then the third thread is the the ability to build something, right? Is the
Hmm.
drive to build and create something is a common thread. I mean, I remember even back in my undergrad days, I started this organization. Wherever I've gone, I've always tried to create something, even if it's in a small way. And that's always been a driver, and that gives me joy. So it's probably those three things that are the common threads in this journey.
Okay, so when you're in Microsoft and then you're joining these startups and you're getting to talk to founders and you're kind of on the sales side, we could talk about how you migrated to the marketing side in
Yeah,
a
I
minute.
started in it was the other way around, Craig. I started in marketing, then moved to sales. But yeah, I'd be
Oh,
happy to
okay.
keep going. Yes.
But I'm curious, having an engineering background, did you find yourself having a hard time like being functionally put in sales when you had such an engineering bent where you couldn't necessarily like cross over too far into product or engineering? And yet you were limited in certain ways with trying to transmute or translate the feedback from the market from
Ah,
customer facing roles into like how was that experience for you?
no, it's
Or
such a
did
good
you find
question.
yourself naturally inclined to just be okay with the front facing side?
No, it's such a good question. I think in many ways it proved to be an advantage. I'm technical enough. I'm just technical enough where I understand what's going on, no matter what the technology is. I couldn't code, develop anything to save my life, but I understand how the pieces fit together. I understand enough of what's going on to to get a sense for what how people are solving problems, specific problems. So, I think I had my sweet spot. What I figured out quickly is my sweet spot is this ability to understand what's going on the technical side and talk to people about it in a way that I understand their pains, their needs, and I can be a translation engine, if you will. And it's something that I find myself doing today almost on a daily basis in my company is seeing the problems that marketers, sellers, CROs, CMOs, VPs of product marketing are facing on a daily basis, having conversations about how best to solve that problem with the product and engineering team. And while I can't develop the solution, knowing enough to know what would be a pretty good solution. So, in some ways, that's my sweet spot. And my education has helped quite a bit in giving me the ability to understand how the different pieces fit together. And then there's some natural aptitude, which it's a personality type thing. There are people who enjoy talking to other people and enjoy having, these conversations or the ping pong, if you will, that comes from trying to convince people to of a particular point of view or shaping a worldview together. And that's me. And the engineering degree combined with that aptitude has served me quite well. And it's also what's driven my success at places like Microsoft, a deeply technical, nerdy, geeky environment, which I loved,
Hmm.
and all the startups that I've done since.
Do you feel like you were able to scratch the itch of why you chose material science and then moved into something that's so much more ethereal, like software, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My undergrad degree was in polymer science, which was, yes, there's a very tangible sort of material sense to it, but it's really about patterns, right? It's
Mm.
about these long carbon chains that shape different polymer sciences. So I've always been a little bit of an abstract patterns person, and I did not enjoy my master's degree because it dealt way more with metals
Oh,
and
interesting.
ceramics. And it also really, the big thing was for me to build a career in material science would have meant long stretches in a lab without human contact.
Ah, interesting.
And that just didn't speak to me. I didn't really want to work more with machines than humans. I wanted some mix of the two, or a healthy mix of the two. And so I've never really missed that ever in my career.
Wow. That's so interesting. Okay. Thanks for helping me connect the dots there. I was trying to figure out that transition. So when we think about your love for people and you're selling and you're in these technical nerdy environments, which seems like it just, it's really your happy place. It seems
It is.
like.
It really is. Yes.
Talk to me about the experience you had before you started your company, forming teams, being a leader, like the growth and maturation of your leadership abilities. What's a significant moment or two that you can speak to where you saw that you had a knack for, taking on more of the entrepreneurial vision casting strategy, bringing the team together, hiring, recruiting, you know, reporting, because you obviously were working your way toward being a founder by going through that process from large company to small company.
Yeah. 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 What a great question. I think there's a deep sense of gratitude here because I've gotten to work with some absolutely amazing leaders in my journey. And at Microsoft, I worked with some amazing people. I worked with this person, Prashant Ketkar, who was my manager at Microsoft, who's an amazing leader. I got to see firsthand how he was translating his energy, enthusiasm, domain expertise into new products, new offerings. I worked for a very short period of time with Scott Guthrie, this person who runs a big part of Microsoft now, and probably, this was a very short exposure period for me, but I ran this meeting every week for Satya Nadella for about 6 months, roughly, where he probably doesn't remember who I am. I'd be shocked, but I was the one who was bringing in the huge printouts because those were days when we were still printing stuff out and having a slide deck, projecting a slide deck. And I
Oh
got
yeah.
to see these leaders in action in a daily basis. And I learned so much from them in terms of how they made decisions, how they built teams, how they motivated people, how they knew what problems to focus on. And that same privilege fortune continued at places like Apptio. My CMO there was this person named Chris Pick, who I count as one of my mentors. He's phenomenal. He's just the most talented marketer that I've ever had an opportunity to work with. And they gave me these opportunities to learn and grow. And I quickly figured out that one, you have to be a manager before you can be a leader. You have to know how to get things done on time, how to, again, break down these problems into smaller pieces, manage the resources, budgets, time, people you've been given. The transition from being a manager to a leader is really two things. One is figuring out what needs to be done more than how. The how piece you have to learn during the managerial phase, if you will, and clearly, the learning, the development continues over a period of time. And the second piece is you have to figure out how to motivate people, develop people, because the that's the how piece that is the trickiest piece. How do you take this problem, break it into pieces, whatever you're trying to do? How do you figure out how to solve that problem with the people you have, by developing the people you have, or by hiring new people, by motivating them, by really reaching them, communicating them on a daily basis? And that is something that I really enjoy. It gives me energy to do that on an ongoing basis. And the thing that startups do for you is you go from 0 to 60 way faster at a startup in terms of the exposure you get than you would at a bigger company. Like at a Microsoft, to get the opportunity to make some of these decisions, to take some of these risks, would take you 10 years because you have to work through the process. The risks there are much higher. The scale is so much bigger that Microsoft is conservative because they have to be. Sort of makes sense. At a startup, you don't have that luxury. So if you want to go get a masterclass, an accelerated masterclass in leadership and management, you should go join a startup. There's some element of fortune. You still have to work with good people. So I think I gave you some names at Microsoft. The other person that I got a chance to work with at Apptio was this person by the name of Alex Shootman, who was a co-founder at Eloqua. And I think Apptio was a deeply formative experience for me. It was a very well-run company in many ways. They picked a really difficult problem, but they were solving it in this very unique way, both from a technology perspective, but also from a marketing perspective, because it was category creation.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience, more than anything else, has really shaped my journey from a tech leadership perspective, because I saw Sunny, the CEO, take on this really gnarly problem and solve it with Chris's help. And Chris took on the problem and figured out how he was going to build a nonprofit along with a startup marketing team to really get CIOs bought into this idea of what was called technology business management. Having a front row seat to that, getting to solve that problem with Chris really gave me the confidence. And this is again to Chris's credit, where he kept giving me responsibility. John Novak was one other person who was my manager there, was hugely helpful too. But these people, they trusted me. They saw something in me at that point that I didn't even see in myself, gave me opportunities, and I learned from them and in going through this journey. I don't know if I really addressed your question head on, Kraig, but that's sort of what comes to mind right first off.
No, I think you nailed it. I wanted to understand your journey of understanding your leadership capabilities, and you had so many people, obviously, that were influential, amazing leaders that now you can
Yes.
walk in their footsteps in executing your own deal. So, did I hear you correctly earlier when you said that you joined Apptio when it was roughly 20 million all the way until it went public?
Yes, right before they went public, I left pretty much on the cusp of them going public.
What was that time frame?
Ooh, 20.
Like roughly how many years?
Oh, that was 3 years, roughly 3.5 years.
Wow, that's. Do you remember what the revenue roughly was when they went public? Ish.
Oh, I don't know if I can state that. I mean, I guess they're a part of IBM now,
Yeah.
but it was in the
Yeah.
hundreds of millions at that point,
Yeah.
125 or so.
Yeah. Well, that's still amazing. I mean, I always ask people for the stories of what was headcount and revenue when you joined, and when you left, what was it? And it's always interesting to try to help people identify, because everyone's going to want to take so much credit for that growth, especially with the
Yes.
leaders I talk to. It's all them, right? But no, that's an amazing story, to take something from 20 million to over 100 million, and to
Yeah,
write that
and
out in a 3-year window. It's wild.
no, it's crazy. And again, Kraig, zero, like by no stretch of imagination am I saying that they
It
got there
was you.
because of me. Yeah, in all humility, I feel fortunate that I got to work with people like Sunny and Chris
Yeah.
in particular. And Chris deserves a huge amount of credit for how he built this community of CIOs and how he built this discipline of technology business management with it. I've not seen anybody else do that ever. And that's really what drove the growth of the company. So to be a part of that journey was huge.
Well, so I want to kind of go through this because I think this will be fun and interesting for the listeners too. So we went from big to smaller to smaller to smaller to smaller, right? So
Indeed.
the lessons that you learned so you talked about just now, you're giving everybody else the credit, but as you start getting into smaller organizations, you're wearing more hats. You have more responsibility. The mistakes are potentially life and death to the
Yeah,
company.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what was sort of the next big significant period for you after Apptio, and how did you kind of learn as you stepped into something smaller and you took on more? Can you kind of just take us sequentially through that journey up until you broke off on your own?
Yeah. The the big thing, I mean, Abraham Lincoln had this thing where he would talk about, President Lincoln would say, if you have an hour to chop down a tree, like spend the first 45 minutes sharpening the axe, something like that,
Yep.
which is so true. There's a huge bias for action in startups, rightfully so, because No amount of thinking about something solves for anything. That being said, what I've learned over and over and over again is defining the problem carefully, thoughtfully, is more than half the solution for the problem in most cases. And in interesting ways, this is the thing that my co-founder and I really bonded over. And it's something that's super important for us today. Is we start every conversation by asking, what's the problem statement? What are we really trying to solve for here? And spending some time defining that problem statement carefully. I think it's also the product management way of thinking in so many ways. But coming back to your question of uh, how did I learn that? Sort of what was the journey like? So I went from Apptio to companies where I owned marketing essentially, and in a couple of cases I owned pieces of sales as well. And the hardest problem to solve wasn't just getting something done; it was figuring out what to do. And really, what is the problem that we're trying to solve now? And what I found great leaders do better than not so great leaders is they were really good at diagnosing the problem, one, in a way that was very actionable and crisp and clear to the rest of the organization. Right? That's number one. Number two, they were really good at figuring out off the vast number of solutions that are available, what's the solution that is feasible that we can go after with the amount of resources that we have today. That's number two. And number three, motivating people to go solve that specific problem. And I mean, even if I think about the example of Skilljar, which was the last company that I worked at before I started my own company, it works in the customer education space. And the CEO co-founder there, Sandy Lynn, phenomenal leader, has done an amazing job of, again, building something that's sort of a category creation product. And she's taken a very measured approach to building this company. And at every stage in the growth journey for that company, she's asked herself, sort of, where are we? Where are we from an evolution of this discipline perspective? Where is the opportunity? What are people picking? What sort of problems are they? What solutions are they picking for this problem today? How do we position ourselves against it? And that's the kind of thinking that then filters through to the marketing and sales side as well. And clearly, I've made a lot of mistakes in this journey. I think everybody in startups, it can't be quite like baseball. I don't think batting 300 gets you anywhere. But if you're making good decisions 2 out of every 3 times, that's pretty good. The important thing is to do the irreversible decisions right. The big things you have to get right. If you get some of the small things wrong, that's fine. You can go fix them, correct them. But you have to get the big thing right. Again, I've given you, I don't know if I'm answering the question head on, so I'll pause here, Kraig, and see if this is sort of where you wanted me to go with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's an organic conversation, right? So I don't think there's any particular way I expect you to answer any of the questions. Especially with me asking you when you're going from big companies to small companies, like, what did you learn and what was the journey like? It's a pretty open-ended question. So,
yes.
This has been amazing. Again, you're continuing
Actually, one last point.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Kraig, on that, which is the bigger the company, the more defined the problem is by the time it gets to you. Right? Let's say you're a mid-level manager. You're typically given, like, this is the problem to solve, go solve it. The smaller the company, the more you have to figure out what the problem is in the first place. And that's the very definition of ambiguity to me. That's the kind of ambiguity I enjoy, which is, well, how are we going to define this problem? And in so many ways, what's the best way to define this problem in a way that's to our benefit, to our advantage, such that solving this problem gives us the most competitive advantage, if that makes sense. That's fun.
Well, that actually brings it all together for me. That was awesome that you added that in. Yeah, because you started talking about the importance of defining the problem being half the solution, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that was awesome, the way that you brought that together. So I'm curious, when you look back and you think about the problem that you're solving today, helping B2B companies identify the right part of the TAM, the total addressable market that they're going to have the most success with, right? The people that are engagement ready. Was that the word that you used? Was that the term?
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Engagement ready, right?
Yes.
So how long ago were you starting to identify that thing? I mean, you talked about that you'd seen the pattern through everything. Were you aware of it, or was it just something that was always there and then eventually it just became like a light bulb moment, like this is what I want to go solve for?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, two things. Two, one, this is a problem that I've had to solve myself in some way at every company that I worked
Right.
at,
Right.
right? And I think I gave you a little bit of the picture at Apptio, which was because you're creating a category,
Yeah.
because it's a category, brand new category, what you have to do is get the thought leaders, the lead in one room and really sell them on the discipline and then co-create that discipline with them. That's really the only way to do it, especially if
Mm.
you have a 6 to 7 figure deal that you're talking about. But that's not a luxury, or that's not a capability that most companies have. Like, that's what made Apptio a unicorn, right? They had these people and the investors and the belief that it could work out, and it worked out, and they made really good bets. For most companies, the deal size isn't that big. So really what they're trying to figure out is, in this market that we could sell to, who are the people that have already defined this problem that we could go solve? That's sort of audience number one. Number two is, who are the people that have figured out what they need for a solution and are, potentially looking for a solution. And number three are, who are the people who know what they want and are looking for vendors to come solve that solution. And intent really fits more in that third and maybe a part of that second
Mm-hmm.
bucket, if it makes sense from a behavioral perspective. So I saw this journey play out company across company, right? Company after company, which is, you're trying to sell to these people and you're always trying to figure out, how do I reach people who are potentially in that second bucket, maybe even the first bucket? Because
Mm-hmm.
the more you can shape somebody's buying journey, the more likely they are to buy you, right? If you get to someone who's about to make a decision, it's typically too late. They've already made up their mind based on education they've gotten from someone else. And in a lot of cases, it's your competitor. So there was always this struggle of, like, how do I read these signals that are out there in a way that gives me the edge on my competition or on whatever people are using to solve this problem today? That was one thing that was always brewing in my mind. And the second thing was the pandemic and getting, not to get too dark on it, but really facing your mortality and saying, well, if this were it, or if I was coming to the end of my time, what would I regret the most? And I quickly realized that if I didn't take a shot at pursuing something that I firmly believed in, I would regret it. And the
Mm.
way I thought about it was, you're always told, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Right? That's sort of the question that we pose sometimes to our teams, to our kids. I actually prefer a different question, for at least for where I am in my stage of life. What would you do even if you knew you would fail?
Mm-hmm. Totally
Right?
flips it around. Yeah.
Completely flips it around. And it's not to take a pessimistic view of things. It's to say, what do you believe in so strongly that just pursuing that thing is meaningful to you? And what's interesting is, if you look at it from that point of view, I strongly suspect you're successful more often than not.
Mm.
Is you're focused on, we haven't talked books at all, but really the best book that I've read on this is Stoicism is having its moment, right? Like, a bunch
Yeah.
of people are talking about it.
Yep.
But there was Bill Walsh, who, I'm not a 49ers fan, especially being in Seattle, but Bill Walsh, the old 49ers coach, the originator of the West Coast offense, wrote this great book called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And in that book, he talks about the journey of taking the 49ers, who were a somewhat dysfunctional team, and making them into a 3-time Super Bowl champion team. And he talked about the importance of just focusing on process and focusing on joy in doing what you're doing and believing in the drills and even in the amount of polish on your shoes when you show up to practice, small things like that.
Mm.
That's really what I was thinking about when I thought, there's this problem, it's gnarly, I've tried to solve it. Two, is that the thing that feels like the kind of thing that I want to go figure it out over an extended period of time? And if I don't do it, I will always have this thing in the back of my head about, why didn't I take that shot? Because life is short. And in many ways, what you said about risk, it's interesting. People who work at big companies may think they're in a safer place, but that's not always true.
Mm-hmm.
right? There are layoffs and rifts and all kinds of things. And yes, it's extremely scary in the early days to go from a guaranteed paycheck to becoming an entrepreneur. It's also tremendously freeing once you're there, right? You're doing this, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Once you make the journey, it gives you this interesting like amount of strength to deal with just whatever life throws at you, especially if you're good about managing your wants and understanding the difference between your wants and your needs, right?
Yeah.
Which is super important.
Well, you talked earlier about diagnosing, the problem in a way that's crisp and clear, and there's nothing that will be a necessary part of that process that you take on when you become a founder and say, okay, I've got this new empowered, control of my life, and now I have to define the problem, make it something that's worthwhile to potentially run toward failure as fast as I possibly can, hoping I survive, jump off the cliff at night into the water.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it really is. It really is. It's a very admirable, gutsy thing to do that not many are willing to do. And so you felt that the problem that you have now chosen to devote your life force to here today, um, are you basically approaching it in a way where no matter what the outcome is, success or failure isn't really the point? It's your obsession with solving this particular problem and linking it to the importance of the people that you're trying to serve with the solution?
yeah. It's such a good question. I think it's really having a definition of success that
Yeah.
encompasses the different points of impact
Yeah.
that you can have. And to me, the being an engineer, if you can shape how people think about this problem, and if you can shape how people approach the science
Hmm.
of going to market and that whole process, if that whole process ends up becoming more scientific, that's a gauge of success to me. If you can get people to think about sales and marketing not as this black box where you either throw a bunch of money and people at it, and or it's these artists, these artisanal sellers who come in and get you the results you want, to more of a here's a better, more scientific way of thinking about it. That is one measure of success. The other measure of success is the success of the company itself, clearly, and the ability to build a product that is appreciated, that there's high willingness to pay on people's parts. And then the third piece is the people involved in the journey and how rewarding that process is, not just financially, but from an experiential perspective, from a learning perspective, from a development perspective, from an impact perspective, and to go on the journey with a great group of people, build relationships, see them develop. If you define success with a combination of those three things, and there's a couple more, and it's like the example you're setting for your kids is clearly important in this too, and they get to see you build something,
Hmm.
and uh, that can be hugely influential. Was for me, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that I can do the same thing for my kids is a big deal, and I appreciate that. So when you start forming this multidimensional definition of success, you have a more balanced perspective on what you're doing, and you have a more balanced perspective on dealing with adversity and whatever's being thrown at you, and you're able to sort of carve a path in a much better way. And you also have a much better chance of success because you're going to succeed at you have more control on succeeding in many of those things, not all of those things, but many of those things, which also increases your ability to succeed in all of those things across the board. Like you make your own luck in some ways, where if you do it right, you increase the chances of the company itself being more successful, if that makes sense.
Can we talk about the early concept for the product? I mean, we've talked about the interest you had in solving the problem,
Yeah.
but I'm so curious to understand. There's product formation, there's team formation, and there's like the business model. And what I specifically wanted to drive at was thinking through You talked about defining these different moments of success and educating your buyer and trying to meet them, at a certain point in their journey and the impact you can have there. But when you think about the value, like when you came up with this idea, I'm going to start this company and I'm going to build this solution, and you say some solutions, like I talked to some founders who I'll say, so you're running pilots, you've raised some venture capital. Oftentimes I'll meet people when they've at least raised 3 or 4 or $5 million.
Yeah,
And they have a product. They have
yeah,
some customers typically, hopefully
yeah,
some revenue.
yeah,
These are the early
yeah,
clients I work with. And I think about historically what I've sold, right? So I've created many products, and the price points have been anywhere from as small as things that were under $20 to spent many years with the highest price point product being 20 grand. And then when I
yeah,
switched into what I do today, I sell something that's 60 to $120,000 for an engagement. And you
yeah.
think about, to charge that much more money, you have to be solving something that is an agreeable problem that warrants
Totally
that
agree.
compensation. So when you
Correct.
think about how you've approached the market, how you've approached building a product, and you say, do I want to take a product-led growth motion with building this product where it's self-serve and it's higher velocity and it's lower, dollars to
Yeah,
start? Or do
yeah,
I go with something that's going to be more of an enterprise motion where we're going to start off demanding, 100,000 minimum just to be able to
yeah.
get something going? What was the process for you navigating that, or are you still in the midst of that?
No, what a great question. No, it was a pretty clear process, and I like how you set that up and walk through your own example of this. And it really, what it comes back to is systems thinking. When you think about the problem we've taken on, really any problem, there's the first question to ask is how well defined is that problem? Meaning, if you were to go to your prospective buyers and you said, hey, we could solve this problem for you, would they just look at you like, yeah, whatever, right? Or would they go, yep, that's a game changer. I want that. I need that. That's really the first question to ask. The second question is, are people solving that problem today? If so, how? And sort of how well is
Right.
that going
Right.
for them today? That's number two. In the sales and marketing space, almost never is it a case that people are not aware of a particular problem,
Right.
right? The challenge is they're solving for it suboptimally. That's really point. That's the important point. And in many ways, you've hit something super interesting. If something's about to change, that's going to make that old way that they're using to solve the problem obsolete or irrelevant. And for us to sort of jump a step ahead, the end of free money has made a huge impact, because that's meant you can't just throw money at sales and marketing anymore. You can't have big teams. You can't just spray and pray. You have to be focused in who you're going after, and you have to show ROI and show efficient growth. And if you don't do those things, there's not much of a future for you. So that's something else to think about. But really, in terms of what kind of product you build, how you charge for it, it comes back to who's the decision maker, who owns the problem in the company, and who's setting up these solutions in the company too. So, for example, if you're a dev focused product, and really the best way to convince dev managers, CTOs, etc., is to get the product in the hands of the developers first and have them try it out. The PLG motion makes a lot of sense. Not to get religious on this, but if you remember 6 months ago or a year ago, I don't know, 2 years ago, PLG was supposed to be this knight on a white horse, right? Like everybody was like, PLG, it's the
Mm-hmm.
future.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's tremendous value to PLG. But if you want enterprise deals, you're going to have to complement PLG with sellers. The big six-figure deals don't sell themselves. It's a way to get in the door. So you really have to ask yourself, in the service of what? Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve again? And for us, we figured out that we needed a mechanism where we needed to, the root cause, figuring out the root cause of the problem was most important. And we had to start there. And that journey has really shaped our SKUs. It's shaped our technology investments. It's shaped how we talk about ourselves. And we've evolved in this journey quite a bit. We've made a few mistakes, taken a few left turns when we should have taken the right, but we've been able to course correct quickly and come back to focus on a model where, we're pretty close to, there has to be this idea of message market fit along with product market fit, along with founder market fit. And it's that trifecta that we feel pretty good about where we are right now.
So how did you define your TAM? Can you talk me through that?
Yes. Yeah. Um, Even more than the TAM, it was really this idea of active ICP
Mm-hmm.
that was most important to us, which is, again, our TAM's pretty big, right? It could be the biggest possible instantiation of a TAM is any B2B company in the world at some point faces this problem. How do you find other businesses to sell to? But realistically, we cannot talk to all the B2B companies in the world. I mean, I don't think any company can, quite honestly. Maybe somebody like a Microsoft can think about doing something like that. So the question for us was, how do we define our active ICP in a way that helps us zoom in on the people who are most likely to be receptive to our message, who are most engagement ready for us? So in many ways, in every way, actually, we drank our own champagne, as it's
Mm-hmm.
called. You
Mm-hmm.
used to say you ate your own dog food, but it's really, we drank our own champagne, which was, we looked at firmographic, technographic, use case, challenge, buying trigger signals and said, across these dimensions, what are we seeing in the market? What's true of our best customers? What do we think is going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months? And using a combination of these parameters, we could apply them to our TAM and figure out the right set of companies to go talk to, the right set of companies to form partnerships with early in our journey. And we were fortunate again to form some amazing partnerships and relationships that have been absolutely super helpful, and continually sort of expanding that circle in a way that matches this active ICP, in a way that matches the profile of the types of people who are trying to solve this problem and trying to solve the problem in a particular way at a particular point of time. And I'm not, I could say more on the dimensions, but I think I'm holding back, Kraig, here in the interest of competitive.
Sure. Yeah.
Not sharing too much that's sort of a competitive nature.
Well, so okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this origin story of your company. So you have a co-founder you've referenced. Tell
Yes.
me how that process came to be and how you complement each other.
Yeah. So Tushar and I, Tushar Shanbag is my co-founder. He runs all things product engineering, R&D. Tushar and I met in the early days of Azure, which was a deeply formative experience for both of us.
Cool. That's awesome.
And we worked on the same floor. We had offices like 2 or 3 doors down from each other. And in the early days of Azure, this product was deeply disruptive, not just to the rest of the market, but to a bunch of products within the company itself. And this is, part of the sort of negative of working for a big company is we were spending a lot of our time fighting other people within the company that were trying to shut us down. And we formed some pretty strong relationships in that process because you have to be united on the same page. So Tushar and I met then. We sort of stayed in touch. He's had a really interesting startup career himself where he went from Microsoft to Cloudera. From Cloudera, he did a sort of startup arm actually went to a startup called Relevvo. That was an A16Z funded startup, and he was there for a while. Then he went to VMware and he did a big chunk of vCloud, and he was at LinkedIn. And at LinkedIn, he was interestingly thinking about the same problem because LinkedIn has a huge data set. They have tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator that try to get at many of the same things. But he wasn't getting, LinkedIn's more focused on the recruiter audience than they are on the sales audience internally, or they were at least 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to do something in this space. So we really started geeking out on it together. And we said, it's clear you have passion for this space. I have passion for this space. You have related experience. We enjoy working together. Let's go do this. And we enjoyed, we went through this really awesome co-founder dating doc. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's like 40, 50 questions that you do independently, come together and discuss the answers. We did that. Like we went through this very scientifically being engineers and said, let's not leave anything to chance. Let's make sure we're on the same page about motivations, how we work together, how we deal with adversity, how we deal with conflict. And it's been a deeply rewarding partnership for me, and I think I can speak for him, for both of us, to go work on this thing and build this thing together.
Are you comfortable talking through sort of the early stages of figuring out product development, the first couple of pilots?
Yes.
I would love to just get into that a little bit more, because I'm so curious about it.
Yeah. So we, in our focus in our early days was on the SDR audience, BDR, SDR. I don't know if you heard of this, the sales development rep.
Yep.
Which we've moved away from that audience since, but it was really focused on that audience. And we had design partners. We had 3 or 4 design partners that we were really fortunate to work with. So in the early days, it was really understanding the pain points as much as we could for an SDR manager to get the most out of the SDR team. What are the challenges that they're trying to solve? And how are the existing tools holding them back from solving those specific challenges? That led to, I want to say, an MVP, really, where we, it's a pretty lean team. So we started pretty lean with the 2 of us. We had an architect who was sort of the lead developer, and we had a data scientist that we were fortunate to get to hire pretty early on. So it was the 4 of us, the 2 of us, the co-founders, primarily trying to understand the pain points, trying to define a crisp problem statement or set of problem statements on the basis of that problem. Things like, I have no idea what accounts my sellers are reaching out to. I have no idea what people within those accounts my sellers are reaching out to. I have no idea if they're using the right messages. I have no idea if they're picking the right accounts, right? And just sort of drilling down into each of those problems to figure out why, and what's the best way to solve for this, and sort of what's the best way to solve for this in a way that solves the bigger problem. And really, that's been a key element of our success. Is we not to make this a pitch for Relevvo, but there are so many point solutions for sellers today. So many. Oh, you have this problem here. Use this widget. This widget will solve for that small thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah, this magic one, push one button and everything's going to go perfectly. Yeah.
Right. For that one small thing, right? Oh, you have this other small problem here. Here's one other widget that solves for that one specific thing. Oh, by the way, those 2 things don't work together. Oh, sorry, too bad. Like we can't really own that. And the reason that these point solutions exist is they haven't solved the root cause of the problem. And we quickly figured out the root cause of the problem is that you really don't want to solve this for the sellers. Sellers are so overwhelmed. They don't have any bandwidth to consume new tools. They don't have any budget to buy new tools. They don't have any time left in their day to change their workflow. They've changed that workflow so many times. So really, you have to solve this way upstream of the sellers. And that's what we've set out to do. And that's how we're solving that problem today. Is we've really said you have to get a few key questions right way up front, way before anything gets to the sellers. Let's solve for that. That's not easy to do. That's actually a really, really hard problem to figure out. How do you solve that way upstream of the sellers? How do you match the most common workflows today and make the seller's job easier, not harder, and solve for a whole bunch of other personas like the CMO, the CRO, the head of growth, the VP of product marketing in that exercise? This problem of focusing on engagement-ready accounts is a problem that the whole go-to-market team is trying to solve, not just the sellers. And that's who we've set out to solve for.
So the lessons that you're comfortable sharing in terms of, building your first pilot and making the jump to securing your first handful of customers, anything you are comfortable sharing in there, or do you want to skip that?
Yeah, I'll give you some hard-on lessons. Pick your first set of design partners very carefully. Number one, really, relationships matter more than anything else at this point. You're shaping your product, and you're shaping the strategy of the company based on the engagement of the people that you're talking to. And we've been really fortunate to have really strong relationships because the product evolves along with your early buyers and your early MVP partners.
Oh yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, have um, a really crisp understanding of success and success metrics, and pay close attention to those. And one of the things, failure often teaches you a lot more than success in the early days. Fail fast is, I think, extremely important in the early days, because you may build a feature, and if you see that nobody's using it, there's like gold in that signal. It's not something to get discouraged about. It's something to use. It's again the Edison example, right? He's like, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've figured out 10,000 things that don't work. So I can figure out the 10,001st thing that works. But in almost every single case, you have to revisit the problem statement. If you find a particular solution not working and say, is that really the right problem statement? Okay, if it is, let's take another crack at it. Or do we need to tweak the problem statement based on what we've learned? That's number two. You need really tight iterative loops to make that happen. And number three is empathy. Really, the combination of empathy and deep analysis is what makes the biggest difference. And some example would be, you see somebody not use a particular feature. You build this thing and they're not using it. Well, it's easy to get frustrated and say, what, we built this thing, you said you wanted this and you're not using it. A better way to approach the conversation is to say, what's going on? Like, we thought that they would have time in their day or their week where they would come here and look for this thing, and they're not doing this. They're not doing this because they're probably not going to leave whatever they're doing at all. So a better solution might be to take this information insight that we have and take it to where they are already and see if that works better. So paying really close attention to when something doesn't go right ends up being way more impactful than getting frustrated or emotional in some ways about what's going on. I don't know if that gives you a slightly better sense for that.
Yeah. So the moment that you were like, this is so interesting to me because when companies first start out, they're going to leverage their network, right? We
Yes.
call them friendlies, right? So the warm introductions for early conversations to figure out product market fit and to try to start to produce enough value with the pilot to where people are like, okay, I can't live without this solution now. Thank you for bringing it into our world. And then saying, and by the way, now we expect you to start paying for this thing.
Yes.
Are we, how far into the sort of non-friendlies portion of the market are we? I mean, or does it just grow outward by word of mouth? I mean, can you talk through that sort of organic expansion? Because I think a lot of times the question for people is, well, do you really have something, or are you just getting feedback from these 10 accounts that you had warm introductions to and they're doing you a favor? I mean, there's a point at which it either is real or it's not real, right?
It's totally fair question. We decided pretty early on not to only do paid engagements, to only have paid customers from day zero. And the reason we did that is we said, if this truly is a problem worth solving, that everybody's so interested in solving it, sure, the early people have to take a leap of faith with us, but we have networks. We can find these people that take leaps of faith with us. But it's important for them to pay because that's how you know they're serious about solving that particular problem, number one. That's also how you know they're going to be committed to you and spending time with you, because they need to show ROI for the investments that they've made. So that was the first decision that we made. Second, we've been at it for a couple of years and we're way beyond the let's sell this to friends and family or the network point, where we figured out a way to talk about this problem with complete strangers in a way that draws them in a way that sparks connections, in a way that sparks buy-in, and in a way that where we can close deals and even renew deals at this point. So
that's amazing.
That's the second part. It's like, can you do that as a success metric, to your point, right? To your reaction. It's like, can you figure out a way in which, sure, you can talk about this to your friends, but can you go to a skeptical audience and talk about this in a way where they're like, interesting. This is interesting. Tell me more.
Can you deliver it and then renew it, right? Like those are such key data points. So looking back on the last couple of years, so can we say the timeline that you've kind of been alive as a company. I don't know exactly. Some people consider, the start of the company when they're actually in the market making offers. Some say it's when you filed your articles of incorporation. You said a couple of years, roughly, right?
Yes, roughly. Yeah. We've been in market somewhere between 18 months to 2 years.
Okay. So if you look back on the last couple of years, I'm just curious because I find this fascinating. What are the most peak moments for you when you had your first customer pay you? Was it was it the impact of the product? Like what can you point to that was like the moment, like one of the biggest
Yeah,
spikes?
yeah. Two or three pop out. One, yes, the first time you have a customer not pay you as much as renew,
Hmm. Oh,
huge,
interesting.
huge. Like pay you, it's a leap of faith, early days,
Right.
right?
Right.
But to renew is what you've created is delivering value. And even better, when they've expanded, which we've done with a significant chunk of our customers, when they're expanding from what you've
Hmm.
sold them first,
Hmm.
oh, that's huge. That's huge. The second is to see the impact where they're like, hey, we launched this campaign and it's killing it. Like our response rates are so much better than they used to be in the past. And we've booked so many more meetings. And that's huge. Right? That sort of instant feedback. That sort of feedback, it's not instant, but that sort of feedback is huge. And number three is we've seen a bunch of people get promoted because they were using our product. And that's incredibly exciting to see, right? Where people have used your product to go from being SDRs to AEs. People have gone from being growth leaders to VPs of growth, VPs of from being VP to an SVP to a CMO. Somebody who went from being a CMO to a CRO. And clearly, we're not taking credit for all of it, but we had a small part to play in that journey, and that's hugely gratifying. And I'd say the fourth one is when people come to you, when our customers come to us and say, we have this gnarly problem. We don't know if if you can you sort of brainstorm with us and see if you can help us solve it. That says a lot because that says they trust us, they see value in what we're providing, and they want more of it. So it's those, and we've had a bunch of those experiences. That's what keeps me going. That's what gives me energy. That's what makes me run through walls, basically, for this company and for our customers.
Okay, so talk to me about product market fit and when you are able to say we have it. And I'm curious on how that may or may not tie into your previous, current, or future plans for bringing on investment partners. Or are you?
Yeah, we're close. To me, it comes down to a simple thing. If I were not in the room, is there somebody else who can sell this thing to a senior CMO, CRO, and they would get it and they would lean in? Because
That's the answer to do I have product market fit?
that is the answer to have product market fit.
I love it.
And then
I love it. Yeah.
it's as simple as that, right? Which is there's a way in which I can go in and sort of romance this and sell this and figure it out. But if I can get somebody who has 5 years of selling experience to walk in the door with an unknown CMO or a CRO and to get them to lean in and to get them to buy this thing, you have something. And if that's happening in more than 50% of the cases, that's a good win rate.
Okay. That's amazing. So how are you approaching investment partners at this point? How have you and do you plan to in the near term?
Yeah, just in the abstract, we've been extremely fortunate. We raised a seed round to have two amazing investors, Founders Co-op and Precursor, that have been just the best partners for us. They've been supportive. They've given us guidance. They've given us, you know, painful medicine when we needed it, and told us, you may want to rethink this decision you've made or this fork in the road that you're taking. And we're looking for more of the same. We're looking for people who are deeply passionate about the space, who see the opportunity that we do. We're looking for people who have built amazing companies in the past, working closely with entrepreneurs. And then we're looking for people who can guide us in this journey, the people that we can see forming deep relationships with, trusted and deep relationships with. It's a combination of those three things, really, that will help us make that choice
Mm, I love it.
as and when
Okay.
we get to it.
Okay. So I want to talk about, founder-led sales, founder-led marketing, going, on the marketing side, using So I think you talked about them as design partners, which obviously may have been more product related than marketing related. But you being such a strong sales and marketing leader, um, have you reached the point at which you're feeling able to pass the baton to others to have them continue to build and execute while you move on to other things, or are you going to
Without a doubt.
remain kind of with the reins for a while?
No, I think without you, again, if you want to build a scalable company, you have to get to a point where you've defined that the problem to solve well enough to hand it off to the right people to own that specific problem. That doesn't mean you are gone. That doesn't mean you step out. But it's really in the early days, you are head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback all at the same time, and offensive line
Mm-hmm.
to go back to the football analogy. And clearly that doesn't work. If you want to score, if you want to play 18 games in a season, right? If you want to have hundreds, thousands of customers, that model doesn't work. So it's really figuring out how you bring in the right folks to where you can go back to being head coach. And in some cases, that may mean you are offensive coordinator and head coach together for a short period of time. And then you figure out that you can promote an offensive line coach to become, I don't know if I'm stretching the football analogy too far, Craig, but you get the point. It's really a process of evolution. And in some cases, it's a process of bringing in the right people from outside. In other cases, it's developing people from inside the company, which is what I vastly prefer, because then they're domain experts and there's trust and all of that. So that's sort of the journey we are on.
Can we talk about what is occupying an average busy week, which every week I'm sure is busy, even during the holidays? How would you give our listeners a sense of like a look into your world in an average week, and how would you kind of bucket the categories of things that you're obsessed about today?
What a great question. Everything starts from with customers, and it's making sure that our customers are in a good spot. And we have a ton right now. So every day, it's actually the night before, is I make a list of sort of the big things to think about, work on the next day, and I do the same thing at the beginning of the week, and then go through this exercise of what are the big things that need to happen at every customer to keep the ball moving, and who do I need to check in with, what conversations do I need to have. There's a bunch of work there. There's work on the prospect side, which is off the existing prospects, people in the pipeline. What do we need to do to keep the ball moving, and what's going on? Where are brand new conversations about to start? Where do I need to get new introductions, or where do I need to sort of restart older conversations, whatever that might be. There's a third piece, which is what's the feedback that I want to share with the product team? What's the insight that I want to share with the product team? What questions do I have of them? What are they building? What are we testing that they're building that needs to go out? And then there's the investor piece, which is really stakeholder investor piece. What do I want to share with them? What are problems that they could help with? Where are we going here? Short term, mid term, long term? And what do we need to do there? It's some combination of these things. I have a lot of meetings, but they're almost all fun meetings where it's not like we're sitting in a room trying to figure something out. It's I'm talking to a customer for about at least 50% of my day, somewhere between 25 to 50% of the day. And the remaining 25 to 50% is conversations with prospects, people who could be customers. And that means you have to have sort of time outside the normal working hours to do some deep thinking, deep work, writing, et cetera, et cetera. I do some of that on the weekend, some of that early in the morning or later in the evening, whatever that might be. But it's some combination of those things that occupies a given week.
And how much of our time are we spending on site with customers, or is that unnecessary and that we can do it all virtual?
It's all work. We're a remote first company. So I'm doing pretty much, I would say like I have maybe one in-person meeting a week with someone, because most of my customers are not in Seattle. They're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And virtual first has become quite normal, expected at this point.
And
so,
are we mostly US focused?
I have customers in India and the US. So we have a fair number of customers in India as well. And for those, we typically start early in the day to talk to them. But then the others are on the East Coast or West Coast here in the US.
Long days and weekends.
Long days, fun days, because again, I get a lot of energy from these conversations. It's deeply rewarding to me to be working with companies in India, and the startup scene in India has come up
Yeah.
amazingly
Yeah.
in the last year to 2 years. So it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a whole cohort of people I work with that are from IIT. There's so much IIT activity happening with a lot of the people have come over and founded companies here and been funded by a lot of people that like to pull from those universities. So I'm sure it feels incredible to bridge between the two countries there.
100%.
So,
100%.
so let's talk a little bit about forward-looking plans and how our listeners might be able to participate in supporting you. And then we can kind of work on some of the transition questions I have for you. What can you say about some of the top priorities you have over the next, say, 12 to 18 months and how people listening might be able to play a role?
Yeah, I'd say number one is if you are a go-to-market leader, if you're a sales leader, marketing leader, and you're thinking about how to drive efficient growth for your company, we should talk. We can help. We've delivered great results like tripling pipeline production. Gartner actually just published a case study for one of our customers where they were able to triple their conversion rates while they had cut the number of accounts and contacts they were working in half. So those are the sort of results we can deliver for you. And for us, it's as much about working with you, learning from you, making you successful as it is anything else. So feel free to reach out. I'm sure, Craig, we can put contact information
Oh, yeah.
on there. If you're an investor in the space, we strongly suspect that pretty soon here we'll be in a place where we can share our success story and our plans for growth for the future with you. And we'd love to engage with you and learn more about your approach and what you think about the world and see if there's a potential to form a partnership. That would be really exciting for us. So I'd say that that's number two. If you're an engineer or a marketer or a seller and you're thinking about the next adventure for you, please keep us in mind. We're pretty sure we're going to need help on all of those fronts fairly quickly. We're a small but mighty team, and we're probably not going to change that. We're probably going to stay lean and mean, but we're looking for the right people to partner with. So that would be the third one. In short, we've gone from this journey where we started working with our friends, family, trusted partners 2 years or so ago, and now we've gotten to the point where we're working with essentially B2B tech companies that face a specific problem. And that journey will continue for us. We'll continue to go up market. And we're looking for people in the company, people outside the company, and investors to work with us in that journey. Greg, in short.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go a little bit further out than sort of a 12 to 18 month outlook. And I'll ask you this on either a personal, a business, or if you want to do both, that's great too. What are you most excited about in the next 5 years? So if you look out to the future, what does your sort of crystal ball outcome look like, whether personal or business or both?
Yeah, clearly on the personal side, the journey with this company is super exciting to me. To continue on this adventure, to keep building this out is phenomenally exciting. I'd say from a market and technology perspective, AI is without a doubt going to be a game changer. And I think in many ways, we are over indexing on AI for the short term, but under indexing or sort of underappreciating how impactful it's going to be in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
I do firmly believe that AI is going to make humans more productive, more impactful. And I see that as being the bigger opportunity as opposed to it replacing human beings necessarily in what they're doing. So I see that journey continuing for us, continuing for society, and I'm really excited. We're applying a lot of AI ourselves, machine learning and AI ourselves, and I see more and more of that happening. That AI as a game changer, we've only just scratched the surface today. And we have a very limited understanding of it based on generative AI. And while generative AI is a part, ChatGPT, etc., is a part of the bigger story, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, if you will. There's so much more that's going to happen there. The other thing that's super exciting to me is this idea of the scientific revolution that's coming for B2B sales and B2B marketing. And we're going from a world of, we were buying lists.
Yep.
Some of my listeners will remember this. You may remember this too. We were buying lists of companies 15, 20 years ago. From there, we've gone to sales engagement, sales databases like ZoomInfo, Apollo, some improvement. From there, we've gone to intent platforms like 6sense or demand base. Let's look not just at a random list, but people who may be raising their hands. And we see that evolution continuing with what we call active ICP, which is let's look for accounts, companies that are truly in a position to consume what we're creating and to engage, that are ready for this engagement from us. That journey will continue, that innovation will continue, and it's going to fundamentally change how we do B2B sales and B2B marketing. And I'm really excited to work on that problem and to work on a solution to that problem over the next 5 years.
So why I know that you're onto something, I mean, in addition to the fact that I've been in the world long enough to understand how accurate it is to say that this is something that every business is obsessing over, certain people in the business rather.
Yes.
But it's also interesting that this whole time I've avoided asking you the question, how do you do it? Which is exactly what you want to be the impulse that you create in your listener or your buyer, which drives the sales conversation forward to start adding that value and, explaining it to them in whatever way, shape, or form is necessary. But I've been finding myself being like, how do you do that? Because it's so compelling, right? So that to me is, having a sales and marketing background and being in the tech world, it's is busy and competitive that space is. I love your vision of how it's evolving and the success that you're having, and it sounds like the unique angle that you have taken to approach the market and build something unique. So I am also equally inspired and excited about that for you.
Thank you, Kraig. That's very kind. I really appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you.
Yeah, well, so let's just go through a few questions to kind of close this out that will give our listeners, I think, some fun things to kind of chew on. So what's something that's happened to you in your life or career that few people will believe?
Oh, this is interesting. I was working at Capital One and I had a neighbor, and one day I came home and I saw the neighbor sort of jumping on one leg, and I thought, what's going on? So I went up to her and I said, "Sorry, what's going on?" And she said, "Oh, there's this bee that went into my ear, and I don't know how to get her out." She was in terrible pain. So I took her. This was like 10:30 at night. I got her in the car and took her to the emergency room. Stayed there till it got the bee out, and whatever 2 o'clock came, brought her back home, and she went in. And then completely forgot about it. And then 6 months later, I went for an internal interview at Capital One for a particular job. And guess what? My hiring manager was this person that I'd taken to the ER. So let nobody tell you that every good deed goes unfinished. Sometimes good deeds do get rewarded. And suffice to say, I got that job. And hopefully I got it on the basis of my merit. But I'm sure the fact that I'm a somewhat good person also played a role in my getting that job.
Wow, that is a fun one. That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, what is the biggest hiring mistake or horror story that you've ever heard about or seen, and what do you think should have been done differently?
Yeah. It's something you touched upon, which is so many times smaller companies, startups, will get people from bigger companies who are doing the same job and think you can just drop them in the startup world and that they'll be successful. What you always have to realize is that human beings are products of ecosystems, right? We do best when we in a certain combination of conditions, and you're taking a risk every time you take people out of one context and put them in the other and expect them to continue performing the same way. It can be done, but then you have to be very mindful, intentional about how you make that journey. And pretty much or not every, but many hiring horror stories that I've seen have come down to this, which is you're taking people out of their natural element, putting them somewhere else, and expecting them to perform right off the bat. That's number one. Number two is in a startup in particular, it's like joining a tribe, right? So it's you as a hiring manager have a pretty good sense for what the tribe looks like. which is not to say that you should only hire people that look like, from a pattern matching perspective, to what you have in the company. That's a bad idea. What you have to do though is mix it up again carefully. It's like bringing in an implant to the body, and if it's a leadership position, all the more so. You have to make sure that the body is ready for the implant as much as the implant's ready for the body, if that makes sense. And those are the two big things that come to mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think those are great. What's the biggest hiring success story you've ever heard or seen, and what do you think the secret was for it being successful?
The biggest hiring story that I've seen is somebody that we hired two people actually that we hired at Apptio for fairly junior level positions. I remember being in the room where there were other people who didn't buy the candidacy of either of these folks because they had a non-traditional background. And one of them had taken some time off, and the other had a non-traditional background. But what we figured out pretty quickly is that both of them were extremely motivated and ambitious, number one. Number two, they'd each shown a desire and had succeeded in learning new things and applying those things in their jobs. And number three, there was this desire, hunger to be successful that we saw with them. And suffice to say that played out really, really well. And it plays out, I think, particularly well in jobs that are somewhat junior or earlier in the career journey. For most people, hiring for passion and energy and an ability to learn, combined with a good work ethic, almost always leads to success. And both of these folks ended up working out amazingly. One of them is now a CRO at a company, if you believe it. Like, he's done phenomenally well. Joey, shout out to you. You're amazing. And the other person is a senior seller at, I think, SAP, if I'm not wrong, where she's gone from being an SDR to being a pretty senior seller at SAP. So that always gives you so much joy when you see people come in, learn, grow, and build careers.
Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who wanted to switch into quote unquote your industry, however you want to define that? Any best practices? So maybe it's getting into tech, maybe it's getting into sales tech or marketing tech. Any thoughts to share there?
Get passionate about the problems that these industries are trying to solve, number one. Number two, learn as much as you can about that industry even before you get into it. So start reading the same publications that people in the industry are reading. Three, if you know what they say, like, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. That, to me, has always worked out as a pretty good model of building relationships. Start just reaching out to people and asking for advice, and you'd be amazed at how generous so many amazing people are in tech. I'm really, it always heartens me to see this, that amazing sales leaders, marketing leaders, you'd be amazed at how quickly they respond to you. If you're like, hey, I'm looking to break in, can you give me some advice? And good things come from that. So those would be the 2 or 3 pieces of advice.
So what kinds of qualities do you look for in people that you want to have on your team?
A can-do attitude, always, number one, which is, in startup land, pretty much nothing works out as you think it's going to work out, but the ability to take whatever's happening and make something of it is massive. It's also it's a rare quality. It's not something that exists in everyone. That's number one. Number two is a strong desire to learn. Strong. Like, I think that you have to have that, because that shows humility. It also shows a growth mindset, if you will. It's some combination of those two things. 3, integrity, I think, is absolutely essential. There's nothing if there's no integrity. So that would be number 3. And number 4 would be this ambition or this drive to make something of their life and of our limited time on this planet. It's some combination of those 4 things.
And so what if one of our listeners wanted to come work for you? How would they go about it? And specifically, what would be a really unique approach someone could take to really blow you away and make you want to hire them right there on the spot?
Well, reach out to me, number one. And you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. We'll put out my email address up there. I'm always happy to have these conversations, number one. Number two, if the conversation if we can have a conversation where you have a point of view on how you can help Relevvo, the company, achieve its mission, and at the same time talk about how you hope to progress yourself in that journey, if we can paint a win-win picture together in one of those conversations, and if I sense those four qualities shine that I just talked about in that conversation, if we can talk about how in the past you've really enjoyed learning something, applying something, building something on your own, those are the kinds of things that are super exciting to me, and I appreciate and will lead to us wanting you on the team right away.
Okay. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing early in your career, what would you say?
Take bigger risks. Take bigger risks. It's so interesting. I mean, this is sort of the flip side of growing up in India. It's a fairly, where I grew up, can be a fairly conservative, from a risk-taking perspective, culture. And the hardest thing always is to say, you expect when you jump, when you take a risk, for something to be there on the other side, if that makes sense. Like, I'm going to take this entrepreneurial leap, but only if blah, 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 blah conditions are ready. And there's this thing, I don't know if it's true, but like, there's no, if you're trying to plan out exactly when to have a baby, there's no real good time or bad time. There's just time.
Right.
You have a baby, right? I think in many ways, entrepreneurship is that way. Taking risks is that way. You just have to believe in yourself. And the earlier on you are in your career, the bigger risks you can take, because the downside is almost never that bad.
Okay.
So that would be the one piece of advice.
So you've been sent back in a time machine to visit your 18-year-old self. You have 10 seconds to say 5 words. What are they?
10 seconds to say 5 words. Pick your partners carefully. Oh, man, that's 4 words. Hang on. Can I go back?
Yeah.
It's actually, I would say, take bigger risks, number 3, and choose, well, it becomes 6, but I'll do it anyway. Choose good partners.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of one of our listeners out there who's a brand new entrepreneur, who's just starting out. What advice do you have for them that, or things they should avoid? Any tips for a higher probability of being successful? We're kind of on the same track, right?
In all humility, I don't know if I can give advice. I don't know if I've achieved anything to give advice. So, but from a point of humility, maybe from a point of view of avoiding mistakes that we've made, is if you believe in the people, if you're excited about the people that you're solving the problem for and the people that you're solving the problem with, there's no insurmountable problem. If those two things exist, in my experience, you can do pretty much anything.
Okay. Any favorite book, podcast, or piece of content that's impacted your career, and why?
There's a particular, I think I talked about the score takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Which was the Bill Walsh book.
Bill Walsh, yep.
And phenomenal book that sort of stayed with me. Beyond that, from a podcast perspective, I really enjoy the Andrew Huberman podcast, which is it's a health-related podcast. It's a mental health-related podcast too, and it's very important. I think from an entrepreneur's perspective, managing your own headspace is probably the hardest problem on a day-to-day basis, because it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. One day you feel like, I'm going to conquer the world. We're going to be the biggest company ever. And the next day you're like, oh my God, nobody really likes this thing. So managing your own emotions are extremely important. And Huberman has a bunch of things about that and about taking care of yourself physically and mentally both, that I'm a huge fan of. So I would recommend those two, that podcast for sure. Let me see if there's any other book. Oh, there's a book by Peter Drucker called The Effective Executive. Tiny book written 60, 70 years ago. Gold. Highly recommend it. So that would be it.
All right. If you randomly were given, let's pretend I gave you $10,000 right now, what would you do with it?
I would find a great charity and give it to that. That would be my first inclination, because there are so many, again, coming from a position of privilege, there are so many people who are desperately in need of help in so many parts of the world. So that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
What about if it was $100,000?
The first thing that I would ask you is, are you interested in investing in a startup?
Okay, what if it was $1 million?
I think I'd ask the same question because to some degree, and if you said yes, then clearly there's a path that I'd take you down. If you said no, then I would still take you down let's find a cause together where we can make a dent, because $1 million can change a lot of lives. We can also help you make a ton of money yourself, which can change a ton of lives by investing in the right startup. And I just happen to know one right now.
Amazing. All right, to give our listeners a 360-degree view of who you are, not that we haven't already gotten really deep into that, but also what really lights you up and recharges your battery, what are the 2 to 3 non-obvious, more personal things about you that you're most passionate about outside of work?
So non-obvious things, what give me energy? Time with family is huge for me. I have 2 kids, wife and a dog that I love, and just spending time with them gives me so much joy and so much energy. That's number 1. Number 2 is running. I love to run, and I try to get out there 2 to 3 times a week. I don't run a long distance, but I find that it just clears your head, and that sort of physical activity is huge. I happen to live right next to a huge park, so I go run in that park, and time in nature in particular is such a massive, this Japanese idea of forest bathing is so phenomenal. And I really appreciate and enjoy that. And then third is books. I read a lot. I'm always reading something. And just books give me a lot of energy, help me recharge.
Okay. Any final thoughts you want to leave with our listeners?
I would say if you're listening to this podcast, you're already in the top 1% most fortunate group of people in the world. And it's funny how the world around you, everything around you is conspiring to make you forget that fact. There are, people want you to buy some stuff, especially the consumerist impulses. So everybody's pushing you to sort of think about what you don't have as opposed to what you have. But if you start from that position of abundance, and if you trust yourself and if you believe yourself, you can do anything you set your mind to, and you should take bigger risks because you've been given an amazing opportunity to be in this phenomenal country, to have the resources that are available to us, to be a part of the system that lets you take these risks. So, make the most of it. Make the most of your amazing life because it's short, but it can be so much fun.
Well, let's put a period on it there. Aashish, thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Kraig, thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation. An absolute joy.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bear Hug Experience. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please give us a like, click, follow, or subscribe. We appreciate you taking a moment to give us a quick rating and a written review so we can continue to expand our reach and inspire the next generation of leaders to help make this world a better place. You can also contribute to the conversation around this specific episode by using the comments section of whatever platform you're on. And last but not least, if you have direct feedback, a question, or a guest you'd like to suggest that we have on the show, please shoot us an email at podcast@bearhugrecruiting.com or visit bearhugrecruiting.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on another episode of the Bear Hug Experience.
What?